Welcome to Stats and Scheme with Tage and Shawn. I'm your co-host today, Tage Seth, and here with Shawn Syed, and we're going to be talking about three interesting stats and scheme points from week 4 of the NFL season. Shawn, so much football happened this weekend. What do you want to talk about first?
We have to start off with the Buffalo Bills. We have spent a ton of time on this podcast talking about Mike McDaniel, the Dolphins offense, and for good reason. Going into the Bills-Dolphins game, I didn't really think that there was anything that any team could do to deal with everything that Miami was throwing at defenses. But really from the jump, even with those 2 scores early, the Bills defense just played a fantastic game. I thought McDermott had him ready. And for as much as I praise the Dolphins offense, the Bills defense surely deserves the recognition here. I'll let you go through the numbers first, and then we can talk about some of the film. But what did you have on the Bills defense?
Right, I'm with you. I thought the Bills played a really good game, and the numbers do back that up. I thought they were especially good on late downs. They only allowed a first down on 3 of the 19 late downs that the Dolphins had on offense. I think the most impressive thing that the Bills did was they forced them to target their secondary receivers. Durham Smythe and Braxton Berrios have the same amount of targets as Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. We've seen Tyreek Hill just tear up defenses continually this year, and the Bills made that their number one priority. Very similar to kind of what Belichick's priority was in that Patriots-Dolphins game, where it was, we're going to let everyone else beat us but Tyreek Hill. And the Bills defense is so deep that they were able to stop all of that. Devin Achane was the only Dolphins player that really had success in this game from a skill position perspective, and he only got, I think, 10 touches on the day. So other than him, I think the Bills defense played a completely sound game after those early scores and just really dominated on that side of the ball.
I like that you mentioned the first read example because you could see on film, right? Tua is looking to his left first. Tyreek Hill is usually on that inbreaker. How many times this year have we seen him catch it in space, yards after the catch? Such a problem for the defense, but the Dolphins just weren't scared. I know that's not some sort of real analysis, but it seemed like they were just playing their game. And when I think to last year, when we look at the 2 games against the Dolphins offense, where we had the 49ers game, which to me, that was just a really, really high level of execution. And then the Chargers game, which to me was a really, really kind of a schematic showcase for the Chargers in different ways. I put this more in the 49ers group, and it's not to take anything away from the Bills. If anything, it's more credit in my mind that they're playing this, or they played the same defenses that other teams have used, that other teams are going to use, but they were able to find so much success. They were able to, the Dolphins have a gold mine in that really short middle of the field area that they're able to get to so quickly. Tua has a really, really quick time to throw. The Bills were able to get pressure against the offensive line, force him off his first read. And Tua did make a few plays on second reaction, but then there were also plays that I would think, that ball's kind of in a dangerous place. But then I also like that the Bills were able to take advantage of how the Dolphins get so condensed, and they sent a corner off the edge sometimes. And sometimes that's, one of the downsides of if you have an offense that is super condensed, you have that short edge where sometimes you can send a cornerback. And Buffalo prioritized, especially on movement play actions, where they knew the Dolphins were trying to get Tua out on the move because you can set those 3 levels up and it's such a problem for the defense. They were just attacking the backside of it instead of chasing the run. And they were able to do that partially because they handled the perimeter run game outside of Devin Achane really, really well. So when we talked last week about how many points the Dolphins were able to put up on those sorts of runs, seeing the Bills right away really just take care of that. Of course, Matt Milano deserves a ton of credit as well. And it was fun tape because it wasn't one of those where you're sitting there and trying to figure out, well, these are the 12 different kind of schematic things they did. It was just players playing really, really fast, communicating really well, showing that they're well coached, and just executing at the highest level.
Exactly. I think I agree with basically everything you said there. And to me right now, when I look at the Bills defense, they currently rank 4th in defensive EPA per play on the season. Last season, they ranked 6th in that same metric. They were moving from Leslie Frazier to Sean McDermott as defensive play caller this year, putting more on McDermott's plate. And when we approached this in the offseason, we saw it as the uncertainty was increasing. With McDermott, he's called plays before, but he hasn't done so in a couple years now. And on top of that, he's the head coach. How will he handle kind of what he has to put out there? And I think with how much focus has been on the Bills offense these past couple years, it's helped Sean McDermott as a defensive play caller. They went from Brian Dable, who we all consider one of the best play callers in the NFL, bringing up Josh Allen, getting him from a bottom 10 quarterback in the NFL to now a top 5 quarterback. Then they switched to Ken Dorsey at offensive coordinator. I'm sure McDermott was heavily involved in that switch and what things they were going to keep from the Dable offense and not. And I think the whole time, being a defensive guy, McDermott was looking at kind of what he would do if he had a defense again, how he would stop these elite offenses. And we really saw that in this game today, where Dolphins came in with an elite offense and McDermott hit all the right buttons and had the roster that was able to really slow down the Dolphins offense.
And Shawn McDermott, a William & Mary alum. I went to law school there, so that's close to my heart. And I just want to say again, I just did not think that any team was going to really be able to throw a wrench at the Dolphins, because they can do so many things to you. They can make things look the same. They have incredible speed. And I do really like that, the Bills, I think the Dolphins deferred the toss. The Bills got the ball. They scored. They score again. They're continuing to put pressure on you. So that's something that's interesting on the Game Script Matters, where I'm pretty sure it's plus EV to defer that coin toss. But I think Mike McDaniel said, oh, maybe we abandoned the run too early. And maybe he's just kind of coach speaking through that. But when the Bills get the ball first and they're immediately putting pressure on you, if I was an offensive coordinator, I'd feel a little bit of pressure, like, oh man, like we need to be able to keep up. And then I think the Dolphins had 2 punts in a row, and it felt at that point like, game's pretty much over at this point, because nothing's stopping this offense.
Yes, no, that's a great point. And like I don't think that this was the best version of the Dolphins offense that we saw. We had Colin Fogel on Twitter kind of message us and say that the Dolphins had to play a lot more shotgun this week than they usually do because of some offensive line injuries. They moved Connor Williams to center. Teron Armstead went out halfway through the game, and I think Armstead is one of the most important offensive linemen to their offense. I'm not saying he's necessarily the best offensive lineman, but if you look at players and like the drop off from starting level offensive linemen to backups to third string, like there's a huge drop off from Armstead to what the Dolphins have after that. So I think that they can move on and kind of McDaniel can reevaluate what they have. And I'm not super worried about the Dolphins offense long term. I still think they'll be one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting offense in the league the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that. Of course, the offensive line injuries and injuries across the board are just, I wish you could turn injuries off in the NFL. Yeah. Right? I know you love talking about Madden Mobile. You should be able to. I wish we could. Trey White on the Bills defense, that's just such a bummer to have. But on the Dolphins offensive line, when you move a player who hasn't played center before or is not playing that every single day, you move that person. And then you have to fill in another hole on the offensive line. And then you lose another lineman. Now there's 3 spots where you're kind of maybe -1 than what you're used to. So those things just pile up and pile up and pile up. And now I'm excited to talk about the Bills offense. Do you think we're ready to move on to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's dig into the Bills offense. What were some of the things that you saw when you were rewatching this game about how they manipulated the Dolphins defense?
Yeah, I mean, even before we go to the film, just, you do a great job putting together the game reviews. And then whenever you see 100th percentile on anything, there's just only a few offenses that are able to access that level of play. And the Buffalo Bills, when Josh Allen is on fire, is absolutely one of those teams. And Allen is interesting because you have to let him color outside the lines a little bit, because he can get to that ceiling where that's just a top 3 player in the league, hands down. But then the problems can arise sometimes when you have those throws where they're ending up touchdowns on Sunday and against the Commanders, but against the Jets, those end up as interceptions. So maybe where people lost a little bit of favor for the Bills after the Jets games, I think Ken Dorsey deserves a lot of credit finding ways to not really rein Josh Allen in, because I don't think you can rein him in, and I don't think you really want to, but understanding we do need to maybe take away the pass option on our RPOs and just literally run the ball. I think that takes a little bit off of Josh Allen's plate, because if I had Josh Allen's arm every single time the offensive coordinator called an RPO, it's just a pass. I have the arm to fit that throw in. I'm one of the best players in the league. I can do that. So I love what they've done in the under center run game. They're going to attack you. They're going to get downhill. And I do like in the pass game, that Fangio defense, it can funnel work into the linebackers just because of the way they play their rotational defense. And a lot of times Josh Allen was happy to take the layups. And that's not something that is something that goes a really, really long way during the season, when I think sometimes you can get impatient as a quarterback, because anyone would, right? You want to score points. You want to get those explosive plays quicker, but Allen was happy to take some of those plays And then when the offense was able to get those one-on-ones, whether it's Steph Diggs to the backside of a 3-by-1, that's when you take your shots. And I mean, Diggs just totally went off. So it was a lot of fun. And another example of this is really, really good execution by a team that it's weird. I think we respond really quickly to, the week-to-week movement in the NFL. But I mean, they look like one of the best teams in the league for sure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I really like that you gave credit to Ken Dorsey there. The Bills coming into this game were playing 12 personnel on 45% of snaps and 11 personnel on 37% of snaps. Ken Dorsey looked at the Dolphins defense, saw how strong they are, defensive line. They've invested in linebacker, everyone's favorite linebacker, David Long, and some other investments there. And they said that the worst version of the Dolphins defense is when they have 5 defensive backs on the field. That's what the data showed going into this game. And then that's what played out in this game. So the Bills offense put out 11 personnel 56% of the time instead of the usual 37% they were doing going into this game. They had 4 receivers out there, and then without Jalen Ramsey for this Dolphins defense, their secondary corners behind Xavier Howard are always going to be pretty weak. So they just targeted that side of the field. That side of the field. And the Dolphins, when they had 5 or 6 defensive backs on the field, let up a 0.55 EPA per play, which would be a 100th percentile performance. And I think what was interesting was we spent so much time talking about how good the Dolphins offense was, and for good reason. It kind of overshadowed that their defense was coming into this game 17th in EPA per play allowed, 31st in success rate allowed. And, Josh Allen took advantage of that. Second most total EPA of any quarterback in any week so far this season. Stephon Diggs connection was there. 6 of his 8 targets, 2 Diggs went for first down, 3 went for touchdowns. And then the Bills had 8 different pass catchers get a reception. You had Diggs with 120 yards, Gabe Davis with 61 yards, James Cook with 48 yards and 1 reception, Dalton Kincaid, 27 yards. They were just really spreading the ball around. And I think that was Josh Allen at his best form, when he can go toe to toe with the Mahomeses and the Herberts of the league. This is the Josh Allen version of that we got on Sunday, which was really cool to watch.
Tasia, and it's hard for me, and I'm not going to sit here and slander the Godfather Vic Fangio, right? He's been great to me. He's been an important part of my football life. I have no doubt that things are gonna continue to work out a little bit for them, especially as Jalen Ramsey comes back. I think with most of the defense that he's taken over, it just takes a bit of time, and it's absolutely a different style of defense. But now I think last week we talked about the kind of historic starts, right, of the Dolphins offense and the Browns defense. And I don't know, are we a little bit of bad luck? Who knows? But as we get into topic 2, going to talk about the NFC North. Tej, are you sure you want to talk about your Lions here and maybe spread that curse again to them?
I think we need to see the full sample size on the curse before we make any decisions. But I am a little bit worried based on talking about Dolphins offense, Browns defense. We knew those things would regress, but not as quickly as it happened. But so let's do second topic, NFC North here, and kind of check in on all of these teams. And you're right, we do have to start with the Lions coming off that Thursday night victory against the Packers. The interesting thing about the Lions this year is everyone kind of expected their offense to stay the same or be better than it was last year because of Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs and a healthier offensive line. And then the defense was still not expected to be that great. It's kind of gone in the other direction here. The Lions ranked 14th in EPA per play on offense, 8th in EPA per pass, 17th in EPA per rush. And what's really interesting about the Lions offense is they have the second lowest pass rate over expected in the league right now. Only the Falcons are running the ball more when you adjust for down, distance, yard line, and game situation. I really trust Ben Johnson, but it is an interesting move to lean on the run as much as they have this season. We saw that in the Chiefs game where the offensive line wasn't necessarily passing well, but they've leaned on it as well against the Packers and the Seahawks also, which has been really interesting to play out. Do you see kind of a reason why the Lions have been leaning on the run so much this season?
That's interesting. I think that they very clearly have a unique offensive line where they're able to do certain things with Penei Sewell that other teams aren't. But what I like about their run game is they can attack you in every single gap. And now on theory, right, you draw up your run play and every single offense can attack every single gap, but they're really good at it. So on the goal line, when the Packers have that 6-1 front, they pack 4 defensive linemen inside, and their lines are able to say, look, we are going to happily take that space every single time. And I do think that Ben Johnson can sometimes feel more comfortable leaning on the run game because Ben Johnson has the ability to set up big plays and he understands when to take his shots. It's almost guaranteed at this point that at least once a game, you're going to see someone running down the field wide open. Last week, or against the Falcons, where they ran that hiccup concept that I wrote about, where the offense just wants to sell boot to everyone, and then Sam Laporta breaks on a corner post for a touchdown. And then this week, it was a fun one because the Lions love to run a stick concept out of tempo in the red zone. They ran it last year. Packers did a good job covering it in that example. And then to build off that against the Packers on Thursday, Lions get to the line. Defense is expecting stick. Amon-Ra St. Brown breaks looking like he's running it, and then it spins over his shoulder, and it's wide open for a touchdown. So an offense that can manufacture those sorts of explosives from game to game and season to season are just always going to be a pain to game plan for.
Right. That's a great point. I do think that when you look at like the second order effects of the run game and how it kind of sets up the play action deep ball concepts, like the data doesn't necessarily show increase in run game or how good you are at the run game means better play action, but it might be some of the stuff that we don't measure. When you look at setting up plays, and you posted this on Twitter where the Lions ran that similar concept to St. Brown, where he ended up just stopping on that route instead of going. And then the Packers thought that he was going to do the same thing. He ends up running the double move for the touchdown there. And like when you look at the Lions offense right now, in general, you can feel confident about them getting into some of those concepts. Goff has the 4th best sack rate in the league right now. He's basically not taking sacks whatsoever, which I think is really helpful for when you want to run longer developing plays. He can kind of get into that. And the Lions have the 4th most yards after catch right now in the league. So you're really starting to see that it's kind of a similar offense to last year, low average depth of target, really have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond even a little bit too, like start to get into these yards after catch. Laporta leads all tight ends in receiving yards so far this season as a rookie, which has been a huge plus for Lions offense without a true second receiving option entering the season. Now they're going to get Jamison Williams back. So I'm excited to see what Ben Johnson does with that as well. But I think it's a lot of the heavy personnels that have been doing well for the Lions this year. When they're in 12 personnel, they have the 9th best offense in the league, EPA per play perspective. They have, when they're in 21 personnel, they also have the 9th best offense league. And then when they get into 13 personnel, they ran that on about 6% of their plays this year. They have the 5th best 13 personnel grouping in the league. So I think just everything the Lions are able to do when they're outside of 11 personnel has been really impressive so far.
And I don't think Ben Johnson is hey, we need to establish the run guy. I think, again, he understands how to take advantage of the defensive fronts that are presented to him. And those shot plays it's so devastating where really week to week, I just know we're going to see one. It's going to be fun to watch what's going to happen. And as Jamison Williams, as you said, comes into that offense, I think that's going to take a lot of stress off of people. But another thing, we have to talk about the Lions defense. And to me, I know we both definitely want to start with Brian Branch. I think he can be a special player because of how versatile he is. He played the nickel spot for Nick Saban in Alabama, is shining in that same spot for the Lions. He can absolutely cover. But to me, more importantly, he is just more than happy to fill in the run game. So the defense can play 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, keep 2 high safeties with Branch at the nickel. And if the offense motions in any sort of way and Branch is put into the box, that's something that the Lions are totally fine with.
Right. Yeah. I'm so glad to be talking about Brian Branch. Right now, I think between him and Jalen Carter, and there's a couple other options, Evan Witherspoon, obviously, like we have a really good defensive rookie class happening right now. And Branch happened to be the one that was taken outside of the first round, which I think has been really promising early returns for that Brad Holmes selection. Branch has played 76% of snaps for the Lions defense this year. When he's on the field, the Lions have allowed a negative 0.16 EPA per play. So that would be equivalent to the 5th best defense in the league if you just include plays where Brian Branch is on the field. When he's off the field, however, though the Lions go from the 5th best defense in the league to the worst defense in the league. So you're working with a small sample size here. It's only been about 30, 40 plays that he's actually been off the field. But you even saw, like, when he went off the field because of injury in the Packers game, those were the 2 drives where the Packers ended up going down the field and scoring. Branch comes back in, and I think the next drive, or maybe the drive after that, was the interception by the Lions secondary. So when looking at Branch and what he's done to this defense, I think that's been really impressive. The secondary really needed a difference maker like that could actually cause plays and like you mentioned, affect both the run and the pass game. I think Aleem McNeil, for as defensive tackle for the Lions, has kind of been that way as well for them, where he's a player that kind of started more as a run defender and has really worked his way now to being a pass rusher as well. And the Lions are both top 10 in EPA against the pass and the run this season. And they've faced a 6.1 pass rate over expected, which is the second highest mark in the league, only behind the 49ers. So teams are passing a ton on them. And I think in a large part, that's because of Aleem McNeil and Isaiah Buggs in the interior defensive line.
Yeah, you asked me, hey, take a look on film, really pay attention to what is going on. The run defense is coming up well in the numbers. What are they doing differently from last year? And to me, it's not just a schematic point. A lot of times football is just a game of blocking and tackling, and they're able to get off blocks. They're able to finish those tackles, and it's really, really cool to see. And then all 3 levels to me, the defensive line, the linebackers, and the secondary are all, it seems like they're improving each other, where I love the linebackers communication. Anzalone had a really nice play against Jordan Love where basically the concept, the offensive running, the whole entire thing is banking on a linebacker stepping up to fit the run. And he did that, but then he's able to get back, able to turn his body, get a hand on the ball, and lead to an interception there. And then on the back end in the secondary, I think last year sometimes it maybe was a little frustrating, and I'm sure they had their reasons, but you could know they're probably playing man coverage on the back end. But now Aaron Glenn has them in a lot of different coverages, whether it's the way they played their quarters concepts to trips in week 1, or they'll play 3 buzz week at different times, and they're more dynamic on the back end. But that improvement at the line of scrimmage, it is just so helpful. And it was fun to see them. They started moving Aiden Hutchinson around in week 1. And then last week we saw him doing some more amoeba, like running or walking around like Myles Garrett. And he's not Myles Garrett yet, but I think that's a pick that the Lions are surely pretty happy about.
For sure. Yeah, I think you have to be pretty excited with the talent on both sides of the ball now. And the Lions are now in an interesting spot where they have become the favorites in a lot of games while being the underdogs in most games for basically all of the Dan Campbell era before now. So it's about, are you still going to be aggressive on 4th downs and 2-point conversions like you were when you're an underdog? Are you still going to put out these same unique game plans where the Ben Johnson trick plays and wizardry kind of comes into play? That's what's going to be really interesting to follow for the Lions. As we move on to the Vikings here, we're kind of seeing that become the opposite for them, where Vikings had a great record in 2020. Underlying metrics showed them about an average team. Now they don't have as good of a record in 2023. Sorry, I meant to say 2022 earlier, but 2023 Vikings. And they're still kind of like the mid-level team. So the question I want to ask you is, would the 2023 Vikings be favored against the 2022 Vikings on a neutral field? Everyone's healthy.
Okay, this was a fun one that you texted me earlier in the week, so I'm glad we get to talk about it, because the Vikings they're just such an interesting situation. I followed them all last year through all the comebacks and turnovers and everything. And one of the problems for the Vikings offense last year was teams were able to just dare them into throwing the ball to anyone other than Justin Jefferson and then send pressure at the offensive line, which led to them trading for TJ Hawkinson. It was a really good pick to take Jordan Addison this year. And the skill position players this year are just more dangerous than last year. I don't think that is really up for debate. And we've seen examples against the Buccaneers and against the Eagles where defenses, rightfully so, want to devote more resources to Justin Jefferson. And there goes Jordan Addison by you for a touchdown. And then on the defensive end, it's such a stylistic and philosophical switch. Could not have 2 more extremes. Last year, they played kind of the bones of the Fangio scheme, where just cover 6, cover 8 over and over. And their goal was keeping things in front of them. And they used that to shadow some of their deficiencies at different positions. And then this year under Brian Flores, he is he is devoted to facing his problems with aggression. So they're rushing a crazy number of people. They're overloading offensive lines, and they're leaning into that side of the variance where, you know what, you're going to get burned for a touchdown against the Eagles. If Justin Herbert is going to play just out of his mind against all your blitzing, that's going to happen too. But then this week, we see the defense get a touchdown against the Panthers, and Harrison Smith has those sacks. And it's because of that style of attacking defense. So, it's weird to say, okay, we take a 13-4 team and a team that's now 1-3. To me, like, the fundamentals are better for the current team. They've had really, really, really bad luck. And so I don't even know. It feels weird answering the question. And sometimes, like, who cares? But I do think the Vikings are improved in so many different ways. So it's just so weird. I don't know how to describe it other than that.
No, I'm with you. I think it would be pretty close to a pick between 2023 and 2022. I would lean the 2023 Vikings just because I think that the offense is actually better than it was last year. And that does start with the pass offense, like you mentioned. I mean, Justin Jefferson, he could win offensive player of the year again. Like if he keeps up this pace, he's playing at such a high level right now, 4th in yards per route run, but it's not, it's like you brought up, like, it's not even defenses devoting resources to Jefferson, and then it's TJ Hawkinson 3rd in tight end yards right now. Jordan Addison having one of the better rookie receiver seasons so far. So I think the run game has actually taken a little bit of a step back because of Madison Akers both having negative rushing yards over expected, but the pass game is in such a good spot right now. And the unluckiness that you brought up is backed up by the data. They've had 10 turnovers this season and 54 EPA lost on those turnovers, the worst in the league. You think about the pick 6 last week. That's just kind of been the story of the Vikings season so far. They had 4 turnovers on that Thursday night game against the Eagles, including one where Justin Jefferson fumbled the ball out of the end zone, and multiple fumbles on special teams and different gaffes like that. So I think, like, this Vikings team sitting at 1-3, like, they're actually probably an average NFL team, like we've seen from them for the past couple of years. They have a negative 1.2 point differential per game this season compared to a negative 0.2 point differential per game last season. So very similar team to last year. And I think that they might be able to finish around 500 despite the 0-3 start because of some of the advanced metrics and stuff that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a long season, and the extra wild card spot, the extra week, hopefully that can help out teams in the Viking spots. And it's interesting to see just what stage of team building that all the teams are at, because as we get to the Packers, they're also in an interesting part of their team building cycle. And it's hard to set expectations for every team, I think, because of course fans want their teams to win as they should, right? And this year for the Packers, it is a lot more about finding out, what do we have in Jordan Love? What do we have in this offense? And it's one of the youngest teams in the NFL. So you can expect some of those young mistakes as you work through things. But, LaFleur, he's still able to manufacture big plays. They played really hard in that Saints comeback. And what I've liked from Jordan Love is he's shown the ability and the desire to take vertical shots, especially late in the game. They're injured up front. They're injured at the skill position room, but things change so fast in the NFL. And Tej, maybe cover your ears for this, but if the Lions lose Ben Johnson next year, the Vikings move on from their quarterback, the Bills are still rebuilding. Things can turn really, really quick, where Packers fans might see things turn around a little bit faster than we'd expect.
Right, exactly. And I agree with a lot of what you said there. I don't know if this was the year that the Packers kind of planned on being competitive. They still might end up making the playoffs. They have some easier next couple games than previously on their schedule here. But when you look at kind of their main players that they were going to rely on this year and how young this team was, like you were talking about, like Christian Watson, their wide receiver 1, is 24 years old. The quarterback throwing the ball to him is also, really young. He's also 24 years old. So when you look at that, and then what they have at tight end, where they're breaking in 2 rookie tight ends, Romeo Doubs is 23 years old. This is just such a young Packers offense. And this year was all about LaFleur figuring out who he can build on, where they need to invest in at other areas of the field. And that's why I think that Packers fans can be pretty excited about the near-term future, even if this season necessarily isn't going as well as they thought for them. but they still rank 12th in EPA per play, 20th in success rate. Like we talked about last week, we're starting to see their EPA and success rate converge. And Jordan Love ranks 14th in EPA per play, as we're starting to see that kind of stabilize as well. What's really interesting about Love is he ranks 5th in EPA per play in the fourth quarter this year. Again, working with small sample size, but does that mean anything to you that he was able to have this comeback against the Saints, and he was able to also lead a mini comeback against the Lions? Like, do you see anything fundamentally different from Jordan Love when he's playing maybe like with a deficit or playing in the fourth quarter, or is it just kind of variance right now?
I think I try to read a little bit less into the, you see the graphic of X quarterback has Y number of comebacks in the fourth quarter and overtime. But again, to me, it is showed, and it shows on film that, he will put the ball out there. So he's not afraid to throw deep shots, and he's slinging that ball around. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how much, I'm not going to say, okay, Jordan Love is Tom Brady because he's playing so well in the fourth quarter, but not that anyone's expecting that, but more encouraging that he is continuing to get reps, right? Like, your first year as a starter it can't be easy for him at all, as they're trying to figure out and meld the offense in different ways. And I do think the offense, they had pretty varied run game against the Bears. I think maybe they're figuring out different ways. These are the concepts that we're going to hang our hats on. And I'm glad you mentioned Christian Watson. The first snap of last year, he has that deep ball against the Vikings, and it ended up being a drop. But I knew from right away, and you said this is going to be a really explosive playmaker as time goes on. And it kind of stinks that, right, we're going into week 5 and these narratives happen so quickly, because look, the Packers win 2 games and all of a sudden we're back on here talking about how great things are and they're ahead of schedule. Mm-hmm. And then of course we have narratives for the Bears, right? I don't have a ton for the Bears. Clearly it's a situation where a lot of people are trying to figure things out. I will say, on film, Justin Fields did look better against the Broncos. Take that kind of for what you will. Tej, I know you have some stats for the Bears, but I just want to give you the floor really quickly to sneak in some Matt Stafford here, because he's an NFC North alum, and you've been blowing up my phone about it. So why don't you just maybe we'll keep it at 90 seconds. Tell us what you got on Matt Stafford.
Oh, 90 seconds talk about Stafford. I don't know if that's ever happened before in my life here, but I think Stafford needs to be on MVP ballots right now. If you were voting on quarter season awards, like, I think he's played as well as anyone, like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Tua, Mahomes obviously is up there. But like, when you look at what Stafford is doing right now, he currently ranks 7th in total EPA on the season, and he's doing this without his wide receiver 1 in Cooper Kupp. I think the common thing that we've seen from Calvin Johnson's record-breaking season, Cooper Kupp's record-breaking season, and now Puka Nacua, who is smashing every single rookie record that we've ever seen from receivers, is that Matthew Stafford is really good at getting the ball to his wide receiver 1, and also that he's good at playing quarterback. He's the oldest active quarterback in the league right now, with Aaron Rodgers down with injury, and he's playing as well as anyone, which has been really impressive behind kind of a makeshift offensive line and what they've had at receiver for him, and just really fitting the ball in there, on all these different types of inbreakers and stuff has been fun to watch for me.
Tej, I just wish that people that I knew would talk about me in a positive light the way you talk about Matthew Stafford. That was beautiful to witness. And of course, I think Sean McVay, he's a special coach. He's one of the schematic innovators of our lifetime. And you're right, seeing Puka Nacua do it is so cool. And Tutu Atwell being the player that they use in the sort of Miami motion before Cooper Kupp has even come back. And I think that they're more vertical in the run game, where we see less of that just wide zone mentality. And man, I put up some clips yesterday of Puka Nacua in the run game, and he is just totally getting after it. So that's a lot of fun. And it feels like he is not taking the Cooper Kupp role in the offense right now. So where that production is, I assume, unsustainable, but who knows? But he's still going to have such a cool role in that offense. And Stafford very clearly trusts him. He's in the right spots against zone coverage at the right times. That's not something that can be overstated. It means a lot to a quarterback like Stafford, who wants to squeeze the ball into tight windows. And it seems like Stafford leads the league in our unofficial stat of like times my eyebrows get raised on film and I have to immediately clip it and send it to you, because I mean, some of the throws, gravity, I think he just doesn't agree with physics as an idea, but it's been great. It's been really, really good to see Stafford playing at that level. Even at the Rams, they're another team that they're at a different level of the team building phase.
Right. And like, again, like when we were talking about the Packers, where like you can be excited about their future because of all the young pieces that they have that have had early promising returns. I mean, what the Rams are doing right now, we're going to trot out the most rookies in the league this year. Puka Nacua that we just talked about, like ranks top 5 in every single receiving metric. It's so funny to look on sumersports.com on the wide receiver page and see Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Puka Nacua in every receiver metric. But then like Kyron Williams in the run game has been really exciting for the Rams. Like I think just so many things that they have right now showing that they're ahead of schedule. McVay probably is going to extend his retirement a little bit longer because of this. Like I think is cool to see for the Rams right now as we watch it play out.
Yeah, it seems like they're keeping him young, and he's just it's weird to say, but like when I watch the film, sometimes I look at it and I'm like, I can imagine Sean McVay just like smiling as he sends Puka Nacua on this like long motion where he's releasing through the tight end and the tackle, and it's just like this guy's he's having fun out here, and that is exciting. And I want to get to topic 3. I'm glad we got a good amount of time to talk about Matt Stafford there for you. But our third and final topic today. So I wanted to have an EPA and a success rate discussion for a few reasons. I'm a film guy, right? I don't pretend to be an expert on the stats. I think that you do a good job explaining them. And early in the season, we've seen interesting cases where how a team ranks in one of the metrics and the other metrics, it tells us a little bit about the offensive makeup. So I want you to just walk us through EPA and success rate at a high level. And then after that, I want to kind of go through a few examples where maybe there's edge cases and we see what things are really getting rewarded and maybe downweighted within those metrics.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad we're doing this because I do throw out these metrics a lot, but I understand that a lot of people don't necessarily have the background in looking at these types of stats, don't have the time to go over. So just like a high level overview is EPA, expected points added, is just a better way to measure yards, as it weights the yards gained relative to what it does to your chances of scoring. So what that means is 3 yards on a 3rd and 1 is really good for you. That gives you a new set of downs, moves you close to the scoring. 3 yards on 3rd and 13 doesn't do much for you. You're still probably going to have to punt or kick a field goal because of that. So that doesn't increase your chance of scoring that much. So the expected points formula is derived from just years and years of past data, down, distance, yard line, time remaining in the half, and basically what has happened in those situations before and what we can expect to happen to these teams as well. And it's a good formula. It's shown to be both descriptive and predictive over time, which I think is why so many of us use it, and it kind of evens the playing field for everyone. Success rate is how often the offense is staying on track to score. So this is just a binary outcome. Either you have a successful play or you don't have a successful play. There's different definitions for it, but usually people use if your EPA on that play was positive. If you increase your chance of scoring on that play, you get a 1. If not, you get a 0 for that. And so what that usually looks like is 4 or 5 yards on first down. So when you're watching your team from the -20 on 1st and 10, if they get 5 yards on that play, you should feel pretty happy about that play. You should feel like it increased your team's chances of scoring. If they end up getting 3 yards or less, then you should feel a little bit worried about their ability to kind of control that rest of that drive, as they've kind of been put off the track of scoring.
And Tage, do you see EPA and success rate? Are those like team-based, or do you think they're more individual-based metrics?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. I think most stats in football have to be team-based because there's just so much intertwined between all 11 players on your field, the opposing 11 players, and then the coaches and play callers. So I think like most things are better as team stats than they are player stats. But I mean, EPA does carry with quarterbacks. As things shift, like as your offensive line changes, as your receivers change, we've seen EPA shown to be stable throughout the years. And I think what's really interesting is when I looked at the past 4 years of data, your EPA per play in week 4 from a team level standpoint is a slightly better predictor of your points scored by the end of the season than your success rate through 4 weeks of play as well. for the people out there that are heavy in statistics, the R squared is 0.40 to 0.34. So what that means is EPA can explain 40% of the variance in end of season points scored, while success rate can explain 34% of the variance in end of season points scored. So EPA is slightly better predictor of how well your offense is going to be at the end of the season through 4 weeks.
And then like in stats in general, isn't like R squared, I thought isn't like something with R squared being like 0.5 to 0.99, like that's where you want it to be? Or is it something in football where look like we generally don't have that high of R squared on anything, but this is the best of what we have, if that makes sense?
Right. Exactly. That's exactly it. Football is such a low sample size, high variance sport compared to baseball and basketball and different sports like that, where you're not going to necessarily see a high R squared for many things that you do. So 0.4 is usually known as pretty good when grading on the curve there.
So you said, you consider football a small sample size sport. I was going to ask you maybe talk about that a little bit more, because it certainly feels like a small sample size when you consider, how many really isolated situations in baseball where you have pitcher versus batter for X amount of at bats over X amount of games. Now, of course, it's the sample size we have. So it's maybe that can help talk away a little bit about that R squared, but maybe just tell us a little bit more about what you think on it being a small sample size sport.
Right. Yeah. I think, Eric Eager, who does the shows on Mondays and Wednesdays, has a good quote about this, where he says that football is a column rich but row poor sport. And so what that means is when we get our data sets, there's not that many rows in it relative to other sports, because you only get 60 to 70 plays a game. And then on top of that, you're only getting 17 regular season games. And then when you start to apply filters to stuff, throwing out garbage time, throwing out end of half situations where teams might be kneeling it, like all that stuff, you're just continually cutting into an already low sample size sport. So that's why we see so many high variance things happen week to week, where upsets can happen, when we're not expecting them. And then like we can even see teams that necessarily aren't the best team in the league end up winning the Super Bowl more oftentimes than not, just because of the high variance of single elimination playoffs in a sport where each team is only getting a select few amount of drives per game.
Yeah, I think that leading into variance is actually one of the things that made me like what the Vikings did on defense, where, you should kind of look to get that tail a little bit because it is a high variance sport. So let's go through rapid fire, just some examples of basically, I'm going to give you a scenario, just talk about, of course, like what does it mean for your success rate? What does it mean for your EPA? So we have a 70-yard rushing touchdown. What is that for your success rate? And then like generally, how is that super positive or super negative for your EPA? Hopefully straightforward one.
Yeah, success rate would be 100% there. EPA would be about +5 on that play.
Okay. So like you said, success rate is binary. If you have a conversion on third down for 2 yards or for 70 yards, your success rate stays exactly the same. That's right.
Right, exactly. And that's why I prefer EPA over success rate. I like both the stats. I think we should look at both of them, but EPA takes into account sacks and explosives on both ends of that distribution there. So I really like including that in the stats when we look at it.
Okay. So, and then another example, just like a 1-yard bubble screen, and then the receiver runs for 70-yard touchdown. So in that example, like who gets the credit for that? Is that looking the exact same for the quarterback and the receiver on that?
Right. Yeah, we treat that in our data sets as both the quarterback and the receiver would get the total of +5 EPA for that play.
And then that's probably an example where, and I know that you're not someone that is going to say, we need to marry ourselves to one metric and only use that. That's probably another example where, we add in yak over expected and things like that, where you'd probably want another stat to tell us a little bit more about that situation.
Right, that's exactly it. You would want some context on that situation, and that's why, like, as the sample continues to grow, like we get more of those situations in both directions. For every 70-yard yards after catch touchdown, you would hope that there's also like a negative play, like a pick six that bounces off the receiver's hands, and we kind of see that stuff even out in the long run. But when you're just looking game by game, you're right that you would want some context on that.
Yeah, and the interception scenario is an interesting one, because early on you sent me a few of the graphs and I was like, why is Trevor Lawrence so low? He is playing really, really well. I think he is a really good quarterback. So the situation where a quarterback throws a perfect ball to a receiver, it hits off their hands or their helmet and it lands in the defender's hands for an interception. Is there like, does EPA parse that out? Who is to kind of quote blame in that situation?
Right. With the public data that a lot of us work with, there's no blame getting assigned. It would get counted to both the quarterback and receiver. Like earlier, when you have charting data like FTN data or what SIS does from a charting perspective, you can work out filtering out drops, reassigning the blame, like all that stuff I think is really good once there's some manual charting involved. But based on just the public play-by-play data, both the quarterback and receiver would get credited for either a yards after catch touchdown or a interception that bounced off the receiver's hand.
Sounds like you're advocating for a show with film and stats, maybe perhaps stats and scheme. Well, all right, let me hit you with the last one. So what does it tell us about an offense? Kind of generally, of course, if you look at it, I'm sure there's more nuance, but just very basically, if you have a team that ranks towards the top of the league in EPA, but maybe closer to the bottom in success rate, and then the opposite example where they have maybe a lower EPA, but a higher success rate.
Yeah, I think, by the end of the season, the EPA would be the more descriptive thing for you if you just had to look at one metric. At this point in the season, like I mentioned earlier, EPA is a little bit more predictive than success rate, but you still should be looking at both because we would expect those two ranks or those two metrics to kind of converge over time. It's rare that we would see a team rank top 10 in one of those and bottom 10 in the other. You could see that early in the season, but by the end of the season, you would expect it to be very linear between EPA and success rate.
Okay, I think that will let you off the hot seat with that one. I was just thinking, like, right, if you remember, like you're playing NCAA 14, and then you see like the quarterback rating, just how that fluctuates so high, and then it's interesting, right? Because not all yards are created equal, right? If you're a defense that's only allowing 3 yards on 3rd and 8, that's a lot better than 3 yards on 3rd and 1. So I like that how you combine the stats, and I think it informs so much of film, where you're always using different data points, whether it's down, distance, time, the different kind of things that offenses are using constantly from a personnel, just a personnel way. So I think that was pretty good, Tej. What do you think? How do you think you did on that?
I think I barely passed the test, but maybe the curve will help me in there, kind of boost up my grade for when I show it to my parents.
That's a great one, Tish. And but for you made it out of school, but do you want to really quickly, speaking of school, just give some maybe Ohio State, Michigan thoughts as we get closer to that matchup?
Well, I mean, you have the Slack channel with me and then McKenna Hack, who also works for us here, where you guys just send Ohio State propaganda every Saturday, and then that continues through the week. So I'm being quiet right now. Michigan hasn't really played anyone yet. So, you have to kind of wait to see them against some good teams here. But, based on the look ahead line and kind of what I've seen this year, I'm feeling confident about Michigan against Ohio State, and kind of who's helping them game plan, I think is really helpful as well. But again, football, high variance sport. You never know. That's why they play the games.
Yeah. And college football, obviously crazy high variance, got us staying up late at night and then getting up early in the morning to do these podcasts. And, we appreciate everyone listening to another episode of Stats and Scheme. Please keep the feedback coming. It's been really helpful. I know I talk fast. I'm still working on it. I'm still working on enunciating every single part of every single word. And be sure to listen to Eric Eager and Thomas Dimitrov on Mondays and Wednesdays, as well as Parker Fleming on the show on Thursdays. We'll see you next week.